Are we live? Am I good? Do I normally wait for thumbs up? Okay, there we go. The time is now 2 o'clock, and I'll call the March 19th, 2024 not regular council, committee of the whole meeting to order. I'll start by acknowledging that the City of Fort Saskatchewan is located on Treaty 6 territory and Métis Nation of Alberta District 11, the ancestral and traditional territory of the Neowak, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, Nakota Sioux, and Métis. We acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis and Inuit, whose footsteps have walked the lands for generations. It is because of our treaty relationship that we can live, work, and play on Treaty 6 territory. With that, I'll ask for approval of the minutes from the February 20th, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting. Councillor Nguyen?
Yeah, I'll move that council approve the minutes from the Tuesday, February 20th, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting.
Thank you. Is there any errors or omissions? Not seeing any, I will close the motion. And I'm frozen, so I will. All right. The next item on the agenda is delegations. This is the opportunity for the community to come and speak to any of the items on our agenda. That would be the Urban Forest Protection and Enhancement Plan, or also the Snowmelt and Materials Handling Site Feasibility. But we don't have anyone pre-registered, and I don't see anyone joining us in the audience today for that. So we will move on. Our next item is Urban Forest Protection and Enhancement Plan. Today we have Brenna Kelly and Richard Gagnon presenting. As well, we have Camille Lefrancois from Diamond Head Consulting, who will be joining us virtually to answer questions.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the Committee of the Whole. My name is Brenna Kelly. I'm the Project Coordinator for the Public Works Department working on the Urban Forest Protection and Enhancement Plan. With me today is Janelle Hart, Park Services Manager and Project Manager for the Urban Forest Project. We also have Richard Gagnon, Director for Public Works and our project sponsor. And with us virtually today is Camille Lefrancois. She's our primary consultant with Diamond Head Consulting. The purpose of this presentation is to provide the Committee of the Whole with a summary of the first draft of the Urban Forest Protection and Enhancement Plan. At the end of the presentation, we will provide you with an opportunity to provide your feedback and to ask any questions you have. The Urban Forest Protection and Enhancement Plan was split into phases. Phase 1 of the plan, the information gathering phase, was conducted in the spring and summer of 2023. It included a background review of current urban forest policies and procedures, a technical data analysis, and our public engagement efforts. We presented you with the findings of these in September of 2023. We are currently in phase 2 of the plan, which is the drafting phase. The drafting of the plan was informed by information gathered and synthesized in phase 1. We are here today to present you with the first draft of the plan, and I want to take this time to give a huge thank you to everybody involved from administration, the consulting team, and everyone who took part in our public engagement efforts to help make this plan come together. The full plan can be found in Appendix A. One of the biggest takeaways from the public engagement phase of this plan was how important our urban forest is to the community. Whether you live, work, or play in Fort Saskatchewan, these spaces affect our daily lives. They improve our physical and mental well-being. They provide recreation opportunities, shade to help cool you off on a hot summer day. They reduce stormwater runoff, improve air quality, and provide habitat for wildlife. These are just a few of the many reasons why urban forests are essential. With the importance of these spaces in mind, the Urban Forest Plan was created to help address issues and guide us in managing this important community asset well into the future, as we aim to increase our canopy cover. The plan builds on work already being done across the community, from residents planting individual trees in their yard to our heavy industrial neighbors and their larger scale work being done on their lands. The plan also integrates both Indigenous and Western ways of knowing. Appendix B provides details about traditional Indigenous knowledge that was shared with us for the Urban Forest Plan. The vision for the Urban Forest Plan was inspired by the MDP and evolved based on input from staff, council, and the Indigenous and public engagement sessions. The plan envisions a future with a healthy urban forest that supports human well-being and wildlife, and a community that cares for and nurtures the urban forest with guidance from the 7 sacred teachings. The full vision for the future of our urban forest can be found in Appendix A. This vision is supported by 5 goals that will provide the framework for the Urban Forest Plan's action plan. These goals are to protect and grow urban trees for equitable access to lush, tree-lined neighborhoods, which will help us achieve the 10% goal set by the MDP. Protect and restore natural areas to protect their cultural and historical importance, enhance their ecological value, and to protect their and provide community access to the city's valued green spaces. Manage the city's urban forest in accordance with best practices, and partner with community members and organizations for urban forest management, and monitor performance and adapt to changing circumstances. More information about these goals, along with opportunities, challenges, and strategies to achieve each goal, can be found in Appendix A. The Urban Forest Plan also comes with an action plan that outlines 43 strategic steps and initiatives that can help us achieve the vision and goals. These will include short, medium, and long-term goals that range from things like providing community education about our urban forests to developing a planting plan to guide us on where to plant new trees and what types of trees to plant for success. It also recommends updating some of our bylaws to help grow and protect the urban forest. It gives examples of new potential policies and recommends making adjustments to current city standards and processes. Cost estimates are also provided in the plan by order of magnitude for each item, and Appendix A provides details on the proposed action plan. With the first draft of the plan completed, our next steps will be to develop the final draft of the plan. Public education materials and a planting plan are also being developed for use by Park Services, and we expect the project to be completed and the final draft ready in the second quarter of 2024, and we will come back and present the final draft to you for adoption as a guiding document once that's ready. And that wraps up my presentation. So Richard, Janelle, Camille, and I are here to answer your questions and to hear your feedback. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for the presentation. I can start. I don't see anyone else buzzing in quite yet. A couple comments that I had just looking at what we're doing now versus what we're hoping to do. When we're looking at our assets, like our boulevard trees that have been there for like 30 and 40 years, do we look at planting prior to those trees dying? Because when I'm looking at that, I'm thinking of neighborhoods like, Old Fort Saskatchewan, where you have those beautiful canopies of trees, but they're all a good probably 50 years old by now. And will we start seeing them all kind of die off at the same time? And then we're trying to replant from nothing. So.
Good afternoon to the chair. Yes and no. So currently those trees are approximately that age, around the 50-year mark. Most of them will live quite well into the future. And as they die, we will replace. But to replace now, there isn't enough planting room. So they are in the boulevard. And so just the competition with roots, we wouldn't be able to do that.
Okay. And then another challenge I kind of see to the process is we've had, like, at least when I go and I see a visual, there's quite a bit of trees that die that are developer requirements, right? And they have to do it for 2 years, but there's a lot of opportunities where that's not happening. The trees are dying. So I guess what do we have in place to ensure that those assets are continuing to be viable?
So to the chair, that is definitely one of the challenges that we currently have. Last year, we did an extensive program to replace a lot of the developer trees that had died. One of our biggest conflicts is actually utilities within the area that the trees had been removed from. So without coming up with a creative practice or a more expensive way to plant, it's hard to plant where the utilities are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. We'll go to Councillor Harris. Sorry, I don't know why. I have Councillor Harris first on my list, but
Hey,
it's
you're the chair.
did it come up? Yep.
Good, good. Question. In the report, it talks about on the second page, 2/3 of the way down, we have a goal to increase the canopy, adding 1,650 new trees annually. And of this amount of the urban forest plan, 300 would be in city parks. How many of those 300 trees, and I realize we probably have a plan in its infancy, would actually be planted of a fairly matured nature in the West River's Edge, for example? We've been doing a good job up to this point in time of planting fairly major trees along the trail. And the reason I ask this question is many years ago I worked as a parks laborer for the city of Lethbridge when they were developing West Lethbridge Park. And I had occasion to be down there a week ago and to go around that park, and it is amazing. For what was once just a prairie with not a tree on it, now has trees that have been there for 40 plus years. So I look at West River's Edge, and I think the start that we've had relative to planting trees there is great. But it's a wide open area, and ultimately I think it calls for a lot of tree, even though trees may not have been in that gravel extraction area one time. But what sort of a plan would we have to really increase the stock of tree plantings there in particular?
So through you, Chair, to Councillor Harris. So currently, this master plan will be providing us with a planting plan, and it is one of the areas of focus because it is so large and open. There's a lot of recreational groups that use that area and are have the desire to have more forest developed. With the development too, with our Parks and Open Space Master Plan, and ensuring that we have a long-term vision for West River's Edge, and planting trees now, we want to make sure that there's no conflicts.
Obviously, it's kind of like why we have an asset management plan for roads and sewers and water lines to make sure we're not ripping up pavement one year and doing it the next. I guess my desire is to see as many mature trees planted as possible, and that's one in particular area. Mind you, we have lots of park space, but that is, I think, something that many years down the road we'll come back to look at as probably one of the jewels in our overall park plan. So anyways, that's what my question was about, so thank you.
My screen keeps changing. I don't know. Is yours on now? No, it's not.
Yeah, it is now. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, and excellent report. The only question or kind of comment that I had was on section 3.2, the history around the colonization, and it talks about Turner Park being identified as a priority area for protection. So I guess what I would like to know, as we're looking at probably approving this plan in the near future, can we define what that protection looks like? Because I think it really has to be laid out, because is it going to be, are there going to be no trees being able to be removed? Are we not going to be able to do anything down there? So can you be more specific? And is there, I need something defined in here, because just to say we're going to protect something, I need to know what the parameters are.
I can answer your Mayor Catcher. I think the spirit of this at this time is to look at an historical assessment of the site, and this is what we normally do when we do development as well. So if you go to page 71, the recommendation 4B to prepare a historical resources impact assessment for the Turner Park development as part of the campground phase 2 expansion. That's basically in line with what we normally do, and this is where, to the extent that we are looking at this recommendation. There could be like more desire to do more, but we need to identify that, and I agree with you. We need to have a better definition on what it looks like at this time. What we're looking at is that recommendation 4B about the historical resource impact assessment. And I know we already started on this for this project, so this is in line with the regular development we do.
Okay, and I don't want to push this, but I know when I was at the MRB and we were talking about the Ag Master Plan, they kept putting the word protection in there, and I went, yeah, as soon as you put protection in there, nobody's going to be able to grow their urban municipalities or make any changes. So we actually changed the word to conservation. And I'm thinking, or I'm hoping that maybe a word will get changed in there, because at least conservation means we're going to conserve it as long as possible, but it means that, you know, things can also be done with it as well. So I think that that's something that's important. And when we're talking about Turner Park, I mean, industry has grown east of where the campground is, and I don't see any acknowledgement in there, and perhaps there needs to be some acknowledgement about the tree plantings that Nutrien has done. I mean, 65,000 trees is substantial, and I understand they're not within our control, but I think it is something that's really, really important. So a couple of comments that I have. I might come back for another round. So
through the chair to Mayor Catcher, I just want you to know on page 25 there will be a specific information about the Nutrien project that will be showcased into this plan. We're just finalizing the work with them because they have to review the text and send us pictures and everything else, and this will be incorporated into the final plan as a feature project.
Okay, but just confirm I didn't read it in there yet.
That's okay.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's see if we can get Councillor Blizzard's mic on. Yes, we got it now.
All right, thank you for the presentation. I now know more about urban forest, urban forest period, and their protection and enhancement than I ever thought I would need to know. It was very good, very detailed. Going by Nutrien, I think also the Dow wetlands, I don't know if they're trees, but they also have green in them, right? So would that count as some of the canopy coverage, or no? Because they're also in the fort. The Dow has that wetlands area that.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Blizzard, not part of the tree canopy, but definitely part of the entire scope of the work about conservation and protection.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay. So one of the things that I noticed here was, you know, a lot of it talked about getting buy-in by the general public to plant trees in their backyard. And I did 20 some years ago, we put in 5 poplars. We have one of them left because they grow like weeds and were wonderful, beautiful, beautiful shade. But 2 of them fell over in heavy winds. The second one we even had thinned out. So, I mean, that presents an issue too, makes it tough for homeowners. But my thought was, as I'm reading through all this, our lots are getting smaller and smaller. More and more of the subdivisions, and even from 30 years ago, because some of them have that even in Pineview area, where there's no boulevard. Does that present a problem? Because to me, it kind of seems like it would, that we can't have boulevard trees that the city owns, and the property owners on some of these tiny lots. You put a tree up, you're really covering almost the entire lot. They're so small.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Blizzard, that's Definitely a valid observation, and one that we try and work with the developers to encourage that they are taking tree planting and green space into consideration for development. It's an uphill battle.
I think our planning and development should also look at that and keep that in mind when projects come forward to say, well, where's the trees going?
Your worship, to the chair, to Councillor Blizzard, if you look at page 68 and some of the recommendation regarding the land use bylaw, there's some recommendation there in terms of planting and the numbers of trees per lot and things like that. So this aligns with the land use bylaw updates and everything else.
I saw that, and per lot, it looks like the developers asked to plant X number of trees per lot. It doesn't state that they're on the lot, but just having the tiny lots and having no boulevards is still going to hurt the overall ability to have trees.
Noted. Yeah.
You're good, Councillor Blizzard.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right, we're going to go to Councillor Kelly.
Thank you. Listen, I thought the report was excellent. Cannot stress enough how much I support the planting of trees within our city. Councillor Blizzard certainly touched on one of my sincere concerns. The development that council just approved here recently with the row of fourplexes, I'm hard pressed to imagine where any tree would fit within that development, which points to, I guess, the economic, or maybe not economic, but the nothing is without cost. So if the city continues to push and has to push, I suppose, density, there are costs, and we have to come to a balance with that. There's costs with regards to the urban forest concept and the canopy cover concept. There is no possible way that trees of significance will ever grow on those small lots with houses attached and with the setbacks that we're now allowing. But I do have some questions. I support the concept of increasing the canopy cover. And I note the anticipated 1,650 new trees annually. And this kind of gets back to Councillor Harris's line of questioning. I also support as mature a tree as possible. So what does it cost the city, off the top of your head, to plant, say, a 12 to 15 foot or a 4-inch caliper tree with a tree spade in today's dollars?
Excuse me, through the chair to Councillor Kelly, sorry, apologize. A 4-inch caliber tree planted today with a tree spade and maintained over 2 years would probably be about $2,000 to $2,500.
That's about 4 times what I thought it would be. Okay, so if we're truly looking at 1,650 new trees annually, and a desire, at least from 2 members of council, to have as many of those as possible be as mature as possible, has administration given any thought to forming or building and having our own tree farm, our own nursery? The quick math on 1,650 trees, just bear with me for a second, times $2,000, that's $3 million a year. It's a huge budget. Now, I know they're not all going to be that large. Let's cut the number in half and say it's $1.5 million a year. That's a fairly large budget to have our own tree farm and husband our own nursery into the future. Any thought on that? Any concept or pardon me, discussion at all?
To the chair, to Councillor Kelly, yes, we did have some discussion internally about the possibilities for trees and shrubs as well, and flowers as well, because in a sense it's all related as well, but it's just very preliminary discussion that we had on a high level concept. Anything like this, Trees is a little bit different, but if you look also at shrubs and flowers, I mean, you may need to enclose these things. So you need a bit of land, you need a bit of a building as well, and some utilities to do that. And of course, it needs to be served by staff as well. So now, when we look at future strategies for planting trees, there's many ways of doing that, and that's one way. Which, again, as I said, we just had some discussion on that. But there's also grants that are available through the same grant program that we had to help us to develop this urban forest plan, the 2 billion tree programs, and we can go again and apply there in order to have a tree planting grant, right? And then use that in the future as well to plant trees. So when our final copy is done and we have our final plan and the final planting plan as well, then we'll apply for funding in order to plant more trees as well. There's also a partnership with the industries we can look at. We know very well that our Dow, Sheriff, and Shell and everybody in the heartland are also they value trees as well, and they're very eager to help as well. So we'll look at all these before we come back with maybe requests for funding from the city, because we know there's a lot. There's a lot of opportunities to help us to plant trees and minimize our costs. If that makes sense.
It does in part. Thank you. To be clear, I wasn't thinking greenhouses and growing shrubs and flowers. That's a different can of worms entirely. And a higher operating cost, I would agree, and it also confuses the issue. Would not the grant program, the specific one that you referred to, would that not also, could we not also apply under that program to start a nursery or fund an annual nursery program?
Yeah, to the chair, to Councillor Kelly, we'll investigate, and then as we are implementing this plan, and then we'll be able to answer this question after our investigations.
Okay, and Chairman Macon, one more quick question and I can be done. If an interested councillor was to put a notice of motion in front of council asking administration to bring back a report on the concept of a tree farm, how much time and effort do you think that might require to do?
To the chair, to Councillor Kelly, it's a little bit difficult for me to answer this question right now because we also are working on other priorities. I think that maybe by budget time will be maybe something we can look at.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Around in the fall during budget time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, looks like he's good. We will move on to Councillor Nguyen.
Yeah, thanks. It's great to see the
report in its
entirety. I think
can
you hit your button again, please.
I think I'm on.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Sorry.
Yeah, that's right.
My screen just went blank.
Oh.
I thought you were off. My apologies.
I do it. That's right. Yeah, I certainly agree with the comments, and I think it has to do with the recommendation of perhaps increasing the number of trees in landscaping requirements for residential. It's very tight in some of these pocket areas where you're required to plant a tree. Increasing that number, I believe, it wouldn't be very feasible, but and it limits the variety of trees that you can plant in these spaces. So I just want to reiterate that idea. I wanted to ask a question about the tree tagging program. As one of the initiatives or recommendations, it touches on public engagement and involving the community, which I think is a very important aspect of getting everyone to appreciate the urban forest that we have and sustaining it. Are you able, with our current tree tags, are you able to take a picture of the QR code and look up a species of tree or anything like that, or is that kind of an avenue that we'd be pursuing as an educational opportunity?
Through your chair to Councillor Nguyen, not currently under the program and the software that we have, but that's something we could consider in the future for the residents.
Okay, yeah. That's awesome. I think I tried to take a picture of one once because you see a QR code and we need to know what the history of this is, but right on. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. On round two, I know Councillor Kelly asked about the cost of more mature trees, but I know even when I'm looking at my own property and I want to buy a lot of trees, that seedlings cost a lot less. So I'm just wondering, do you have an idea of what like a seedling costs us versus that? Like I know if we're looking at probably about $1,200 for a mature tree, but can we get 100 trees for $150 when we're buying them small?
To the chair, yes, we absolutely could. So seedlings and smaller trees run, a few dollars, like $1, $2 per tree. The pine forest, the Tree Canada pine forest that we currently have at West River's Edge, that one was planted under that type of scope. And so mass planting, small dollar value trees, and then within just a short few years, we were, starting to develop a decent sized forest. So I would imagine that would be the primary method of how we would plant under this, but not exclusively.
Okay, thank you. So going on to Councillor Harris.
On page 70 under strategy 3F, it says develop a planting plan. Second bullet, prioritize planting of birch trees where conditions allow it to honor Fort Saskatchewan's Neowak name, Birch Hills, and supports a holistic urban forest where native plants and animals thrive. I understand the historical frame of reference, but it has not been my experience that birch trees ultimately are a very hardy species of tree. At least I don't see many in my wanderings through our urban forest in the river valley where there are many birch trees left standing. Many that you do see are half dead or dead and falling over. So what is the response in relation to using birch trees? Because while it may have been a natural forest at one time, we don't see many birch trees any longer. So if we were to pursue that kind of a strategy and plant that species of tree, do they have longevity? And does it make sense?
Through your chair to Councillor Harris, I would agree that birch trees are quite susceptible to pests and drought conditions, that sort of thing. I think if we were to focus on birch planting, it would have to be select areas, protected areas in the sense of creating shelter belts around them, microclimate, that type of planting. I'm not certain that currently on the market there's too many birch trees, but there's always genetics and they're always trying to adapt through the different nursery programs to grow hardier trees.
Yeah, I guess my observation in relation to that strategy, I think I would probably suggest to change the wording so where possible prioritize the planting of birch trees to honor. Because ultimately I see that species of tree as being problematic, as you just touched base on. Because I think that there are obviously hardier trees that last a lot longer. Elm trees obviously are subject to difficulties. Obviously, we have many of those in our boulevard trees. The other lawn, the typical developer trees, are ash and that sort of stuff, and they have their own problems. So, anyways, I would just make that as an observation in terms of my concerns about that. And I understand the historical context, but I think we've maybe built that up a little bit too much, because I don't know if we really refer to our area as Birch Hills all that much anyways. So just an observation.
You're good. I'll move on to Mayor Ketcher.
Thank you. That's a little bit what I was going to cover as well, because after our last meeting, I actually went out and I talked to a lot of people, and when we talk about Birch Hills, we're talking about further east of Fort Saskatchewan. Nobody actually identified Fort Saskatchewan as Birch Hills. And there's a, There's a marking in Sturgeon County on the other side of the river that actually identifies where Birch Hills is. So, we have to be careful in the remembrance of everybody of where these things happened and occurred, and make sure that we're not trying to take ownership of something that actually didn't belong to us. So that's some very valuable information, and they have a stone monument over there You're shaking your head. I think maybe know where that is. Oh, okay. There's a stone monument over there. The question that I have, though, is so we're a River Valley community, and we have trees all around the River Valley, and then we have trees that come up by Ross Creek. So with those trees, and we have a lot of deadfall that ends up in those areas. So how do we, I guess, as the trees die, and is there any intention to do additional replantings into the River Valley or by Ross Creek or any of those areas?
Through you, Chair, to Mayor Catcher. When trees die in the natural tree stand forest like that, it's important to leave them, ensuring too that they're not a hazard to trail users within that region. I'm not certain that we would go in to plant more trees, but I think expanding the area around the perimeter of that to ensure that the trees can germinate on their own within that healthy forest.
Okay. And I got one real loaded one for you. As you drive down Highway 21 coming up to 15 by Home Depot, somebody's gone in and there's that spruce tree that's kind of like this, and there's, is the city going to go in and clean that up? Like, what's going on with that?
Through your Chair to Mayor Catcher, I will definitely make sure that that's on our list.
Okay. I actually had somebody mention it, and it was like, yeah, okay, do a fort report. But since we're talking about trees, I had no idea what was being done. So will there be any trees planted along that right of way over there?
Through your Chair to Mayor Catcher, we don't have the planting plan back from the consultant showing the desirable areas to plant. Largely in front of the commercial developments, they're quite open, just for signage and identification of what stores are available within those developments. Doesn't mean that we couldn't do selective planting in clumps and try to screen some of that, but yeah, it's not typically desired by the development community.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Kelly.
Thanks again. Just wanted to touch back on the concept of maybe planting the sprouts rather than the more mature tree. In an unprotected area, what is the survival rate of something that's maybe the diameter of a pencil and a couple feet tall versus a mature tree? Unprotected area.
Through the Chair to Councillor Kelly, I don't think we have this information right now, but I'm just asking maybe our consultant, Camille, if you have any advice on the question, please.
Muted.
I think you're muted. Yeah.
Camila, we can't quite hear you there. Are you able to unmute your computer?
You know?
Yeah.
There we go.
Yep.
Thank you.
Great. Apologies for that. So yes, through the Chair to Councillor Kelly, I don't have specific statistics for you, but what I can tell you generally as a remark, I think you're correct in assuming definitely that seedlings have a higher mortality rate generally than a larger tree. That would be in part due to the fact that when we plant caliper trees, we usually do individual tree maintenance for that tree as well. Those trees tend to require, the larger caliper sized trees tend to require a longer time watering to adapt to their new environment. So I would say there are benefits to planting larger caliper trees, although they do tend to struggle more establishing without watering for an adequate number of years, so they do require more active maintenance. When you do plant seedling, you do have to account for a larger mortality rate because they definitely wouldn't all survive. There's also a consideration about the areas where you're planting. Obviously, planting very small seedlings, for example, along the boulevard wouldn't really be productive as far as the tree getting damaged from use versus in a park area that's a bit quieter. So yeah, there's probably a balance there in terms of the cost versus survival rate.
Thank you, and I would agree with that comment. But nonetheless, overall, bang for buck, in my humble opinion, something that stands at least head height when it's planted, garners instant respect, something that can be trampled on and or run over with a mower by accident, garners very little respect, and the survivability is almost zero. And that's been my observation throughout the town and in for instance, a golf course. It references a desire to increase the canopy by 10%. According, is there an ultimate goal? Is the goal 20% canopy coverage for the urban area of Fort Saskatchewan?
To the chair, to Councillor Kelly again. I will ask Camille maybe to answer this question. She has been intimately linked with this recommendation.
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Kelly, absolutely. The plan essentially sets two targets, one that is citywide and one that is focused on your urban areas, so excluding the agricultural and industrial areas, of adding 10% to your existing canopy. So citywide, that would be going from 8 to 12%, and within your urban areas from 11 to 16%.
Okay, so urban area, because I didn't see that. I when I read the report, I didn't see a concrete number. So the goal would be to get to essentially 16% canopy coverage. I did think I read in your report that for prairie communities such as ours, that the number should be 20%. Did I miss something there?
Through the chair, I'll take that as a follow-up for the question to Councillor Kelly. Yes, so you did see a reference to 20% in our report. I will just give you briefly a little bit of context on that. So some years ago, the organization American Forest, which is a leader in the field of urban forestry in North America, set targets based on the ecosystem of a region, which included a 20% target for prairie areas such as yours. In recent years, they've actually moved away from recommending those as targets to say essentially that they should be used as a baseline and then add to that consideration, taking into account specific land use considerations to do with the local government, the context that you're evolving in, to adapt it to what is most feasible and reasonable within that area. So what we looked at essentially was taking into account that we might be looking at up to 20%, understanding your development patterns, the areas that you have that can be grown, areas where you might plan. This is a target that we think is both achievable as well as closely aligned with that guidance adapted to your local context.
Okay, thank you. One last question, Chair Macon. There's been a couple comments, at least I heard, if I'm interpreting the words properly, comments from administration that the developers tend to push back on the tree requirement because, of course, they're looking to maximize what they feel is the economic value of their property. I would just offer the comment that the city owns the zoning, and we get to impose our will in a reasonable fashion, and there will always be a trade-off. But I don't think we can forget that we own the zoning, and we can set the requirements, and I don't think we should necessarily buckle to the wishes of developers when it comes to finishing off the project such as this plan would envision. And I'll just leave that as a comment for now. We'll bear it in mind when we get zoning requests in front of us in the future. And thank you for the report. I thought it was excellent and I enjoyed reading it.
Great. That looks like everybody. So it looks like next steps, you'll take the feedback and incorporate it into the plan, and we'll be getting the completed one in the second quarter of this year. Awesome. Thank you so much. We will move on now to snowmelt and materials handling site feasibility, and we'll swap out and welcome Grant Schaefer.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Grant Schaefer. I'm Director of Fleet Facilities Engineering, and I'm here today to present the snow melt and materials handling site feasibility study. The snow melt materials handling site study was approved during the 2022 budget deliberations. The scope of work of the study was to review the regulatory requirements, site requirements, and land requirements, as well as providing both capital construction and operating cost estimates. As a little bit of background, the old snow dump site was shut down in 2011 as a site did not meet the requirements of the various legislations and guidelines that apply to these facilities. Currently, the city hauls snow to either Strathcona County and in some cases the city of Edmonton. This existing site, or the old site, is currently used as a materials handling site for storing and recycling asphalt and concrete. The site has become too small to efficiently store and process the material, and as well as located adjacent to residential properties and Ross Creek. The existing site is approximately 1 hectare in size and has become a constraint in terms of being able to move on site. A conceptual plan was developed to identify the site needs and size for a combined snow melt and materials handling site. A site of approximately 16 hectares is required. This would provide approximately 5 hectares for future expansion and development. The site should be located in land zoned for the development, not be adjacent to residential lands, as well as have access to municipal servicing, including storm and transportation systems. The estimated cost to purchase land and develop a combined site is between $9.7 and $15.9 million. It's also important to understand that this doesn't include any off-site improvements that may be required to service the lands. Operating costs are estimated at about $300,000 per year, not including capital. But this is also offset by about $225,000 in hauling and access fees that we're currently paying to Strathcona County and to contract haulers. It's also, another benefit of having a local site is we could provide additional service to local businesses as they could have access to the site for their own snow hauling. A standalone materials handling site would require approximately 2.5 hectares of land, with land and construction costs estimated at $1.7 million. Again, these costs do not include off-site costs for infrastructure, for storm sewer, and transportation. Depending on the specific site, additional land may be required to develop stormwater management and control. This would not be known until a parcel is selected and detailed conceptual design is undertaken. A standalone facility would have negligible operating impacts as operations would move from the old site to the new site. It's also something we've noted, it's not within the report, but we do have a lot of material at the existing site. Processing that and hauling it to the site to use as base for development of materials handling or snow dump would save, we estimate would save us about $400,000. And that would be applied to either project. In terms of next steps, we'll be reinserting the project into the 10-year capital plan to begin the process of land purchase and design in 2025. We are currently recommending a standalone materials handling site, but would be looking to include an option to purchase additional land surrounding the site for potential to add a snow dump at a later date. The snow dump site would be added to the to the horizon list of the 10-year plan. And both of these will be brought forward as part of the 10-year capital update in June. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. All right, we're going to go to Councillor Harris.
Grant, obviously with a snow dump site, we have to maintain the separation between the snow melt and water courses, obviously to allow whatever deleterious substances are in the snow and the meltwater ultimately to kind of naturally clarify or kind of mitigate itself. Is that a fair statement?
Through the chair to Councillor Harris, that's correct.
Yeah, okay. Fair enough. How long does that typically take?
I'm not sure of timelines. It is something that the consultants looked at when they sized the pond on the site. So they'd be calculating the flow rates through and the settling of materials and things like that. So I can't say what the timeline is, but it is something that was considered in the conceptual design.
Yeah. So my question comes out of our last discussion about the tree farm and Councillor Kelly's comment about the potential for a tree farm. Is there any, and maybe I just plant this as a rhetorical question, that if we have a pond on site that ultimately will naturally clarify, call it storm runoff, if you will, could that be used for irrigation purposes for trees and that sort of thing? And I know you probably can't answer that today, but I plant that seed in respect to the fact that if you're going to have a tree farm, probably you want to ensure that the trees are going to grow aptly, and watering them probably would be a good way to do it. And obviously, if you water things, it goes into the ground, naturally percolates away. So is that something that makes some sense while we're at it? And obviously, in relation to this particular project you're dealing with, that is one of the practical things we have to deal with from an operational standpoint. Does it make sense, maybe?
Through the chair to Councillor Harris, it's something we could consider. We'd have to do a lot more research to know whether that would be an applicable use or not for that.
Yeah, and it's a question that I guess I would just put on the list in terms of things that maybe as you're going forward in the continuing discussion of the technical parameters of this type of a site, whether that makes sense. And it ultimately, I guess, in deference to Councillor Kelly's thing, if we're looking to spend $4 million upwards of on land, could we conceivably be looking for an integration of a arbor or a tree nursery in that area? So I guess I'm picking up on Councillor Kelly's thing. And ultimately, if it can clarify things, I think that maybe has an environmental benefit. So I've got other questions, but I'll come back to them.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Nguyen.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation, Graham. I've been looking forward to this for a while. Do we have a value of the existing material handling site, like a current market value of that property? Is what I'm asking.
Through the chair to Councillor Nguyen, it's currently actually zoned as parkland, so we haven't put a value on it to say that this is what it could be worth if it was put on the market.
Right, and that kind of ties into my thought pattern. That so if that site is retired, then we're not going to be looking to offload or sell that piece of property. It essentially has no economic benefit to it.
Through the chair to Councillor Nguyen, I guess, and anything could be done, but at this point we weren't looking at doing anything like that.
Okay, and the other question, because I think some snow is being hauled right now to the parking lot at Torres Field. Is that correct? I thought I drove by there and saw some piles of snow there. I don't know. Is that residential clearings snow that is being transported there and partially being used or is that not part of the plan?
Through the chair to Councillor, I'm not sure. My assumption, and this is a total assumption on my part, is it might be hauled there temporarily until they have contract trucks available, unless...
Mr. Fleming?
Yeah, to the chair, to Councillor Nguyen, I mean, our road staff sometimes do pile snow in certain areas temporarily and wait for the melt or move it a little bit later to the snow melt facility. So sometimes we use the parking for that, yes.
Okay, so it just offsets the amount that we're hauling if in a year like this year, we're not hauling much snow away.
And sometimes it's also strategies to use our own trucks so we don't have to contract out and then basically have the snow piled and then we use our own truck to move it when it's convenient for us as well.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Going to Councillor Kelly next.
Thank you. Councillor Harris touched on what I wanted to broach with you, Grant. If we're in the active search for real estate to accommodate the functions your report talks about, it would be possible, obviously, to increase the size of that purchase and incorporate a tree farm if that was deemed to be warranted. Is that a correct assumption?
Through the chair to Councillor Kelly, if that was the wish of council, that could absolutely be done.
Okay, and I think that's sort of obvious. I just wanted it on the record. I do have a question, though. I gathered from the response from administration, because I think I asked a couple times in question period when council could expect this report, and it was always suggested that there were changes being done. Could you give some council some insight as to why what appears to be a relatively simple and basic report took so long, and what problems administration encountered as this report was being finalized?
Through the chair to Councillor Kelly, and I'll take the blame for some of the delay, or some of the delay, as it did fall, I guess, a little bit off the radar from us in terms of priority projects, but we tried to keep it moving along, but it did delay there for a little bit during some construction seasons. There was a little bit of back and forth administration to the consultant. The original draft included the combined site, but didn't have a lot of detail or much at all in terms of what a standalone materials handling site was. So they originally missed the part of the scope that just provided a little more information for decision. So that would be, I guess the explanation I could give at this time.
Okay, thank you, Grant. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Blizzard and then I'll insert myself.
Thanks for the presentation. I like the idea. I guess we'll just have to see whether that's actually the cost we want to pay, because it still will cost us. When you say 16 hectares is required approximately, but then it said it doesn't matter, depending on the site, there may be some special requirements. So you're probably looking at more like 20 hectares or something, right? To make sure we have enough extra land.
Through the chair to Council Blizzard, the 16 hectares for the snow dump site is a little more locked in place because it already incorporates runoff and stormwater control. Okay. The smaller site for the materials handling didn't have that piece incorporated, and it would depend on the parcel that was used.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Just one question for you, Mr. Schaefer. I just curious, and you don't have to answer this if you think it should be an in-camera item, just because it's land matters. Do we have many potential sites for this?
To the chair, I have, I guess, looked at maps and tried to figure out what's available and what would maybe be out there. There are a few sites out there that I think would be appropriate. We haven't started any discussions or negotiations.
Okay,
I was
just curious if it was just like one that we were hoping to get. So it's good to know that we have at least a few. All right, on round two, I just have Councillor Nguyen so far, so I'll go to Councillor Nguyen.
Do you want to? Yeah, just to take off on that question then, because we've been looking at expansion and potential new site locations for public works. Is this facility something that maybe would be recommended to be built close to a public works expansion yard, or if that gets relocated? Is that an ideal scenario, I guess, is what I'm asking? And then maybe should we consider doing them in conjunction when they come up?
Through the chair to Councillor Nguyen, I don't know that they're necessarily a good fit together. The land requirements are very different in terms of what you'd be looking for servicing. I think for the snow dump and materials handling site, would be more looking for something that's more to the unserviced side of land, so we're not having to spend money on infrastructure that wouldn't support the site. A public works yard probably needs to be a little more centrally located, relatively, and then has that municipal servicing to support it.
Right. I was kind of thinking about processing of materials and how that might interconnect. Okay, thanks for that info. One last question that I have, because I originally had the idea that maybe neighboring municipalities would be using our snow dump facility and charge, and we'd be charging a fee for that service. It looks like Edmonton doesn't charge a fee for that whatsoever. Do we have a gauge of interest from neighboring municipalities, Lamont, Bruderheim, maybe Redwater, where we could look at turning a profit for this type of service, or is that something that wouldn't be done because then there's no value in it really for?
Through the chair to Councillor Nguyen, we haven't reached out, I would say, to those municipalities specifically. I guess our experience is, from a business case perspective, that we're not being charged much at this point to be able to use sites external to us. So I don't know that I would assume we're covering our own costs, but that's really about the extent of it.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Mayor Ketcher?
So the question that I have is, can you talk a little bit about the material handling? Because when I read it, it really sounds like it's a gravel crushing area when you've got on page 7 of your report. It talks about, you know, the movement of trucks and a crusher and that. So can you just explain in layman's terms what's going to go on there? What kind of volumes would go on there? And because at a cost of $1.75 million to acquire land and do construction on it, I'm going to need to know that before budget time.
Through the chair to Mayor Ketcher. So the materials handling site is very similar to a gravel crushing operation. We haul the waste asphalt and concrete that's removed from our rehabilitation projects, whether that's road rehabilitation or neighborhood rehabilitation. We can haul it to that site. We can bring in a crusher, process it, and break it down into usable pieces, basically just down to gravel size again. And then we can reuse that back as base within projects. It has been a cost-saving measure for us in terms of recycling that material. It's really good. We've been using it for parking lot base. We do that a lot. We do that for when we're constructing our own trails as base for those types of things. And we're also working to get it incorporated back into roadways. So it is, instead of bringing new gravel in from somewhere else, we just recycle what we already have processed once to put back onto site. So it is a gravel operation. It's just using our own recycled material. Overall, the site size to hold about, and I'm trying to read my notes here and can't quite see that.
Through the chair, I can
sorry.
help with this one.
Thank you.
It's 20,000 tons, which is a 300% increase from our current capacity.
Can you repeat that? I couldn't.
Absolutely. So the material that could be stored on the new site would be 20,000 tons, which is a 300% increase from our current site's capacity.
And would you take that much in per year?
Through the chair to Mayor Ketcher, we wouldn't necessarily bring that much in a year. As the programs grow, obviously we get more and more every year, but we can't use it all every year either. It has to line up for projects and be the right project to use it back in. So it's about the right amount. That way we can have material that's processed and ready to go out, as well as bringing material in at the same time. We don't have to bring a crusher in once a year or every 2 years to be able to produce the stockpiles.
Okay. And just when I'm listening to you say next steps, having a conversation during the budget, did I hear you say that you would just be looking at this point in time for a standalone material handling site, not maybe looking at the snow material?
Through the chair to Mayor Ketcher, at this point we don't necessarily see the full business case being there to construct a full snow melt facility. It may be prudent to reserve land, so we can find a parcel where we can acquire option to purchase on adjacent parcels, things like that. That may be a way to go forward so that we still keep that option open as we move forward.
Okay, and just my last question. So given the limited amount of land that we have in Fort Saskatchewan, I guess my question would be, would you be considering looking outside of Fort Saskatchewan?
Through the chair to Mayor Ketcher, it's not something I've considered yet. Part of that gets into zoning regulations and what the land can be used for, those types of things. It's something we could consider if it made sense. But again, if we're going too far, we kind of negate a lot of the benefits we'd have of having it inside.
Okay, I'll be good for now. I'll have lots more debate when it comes for budget.
Thank you. Councillor Harris.
Picking up on that line of thought, Grant, so ultimately, this is ultimately a light industrial use. And so therefore it would probably be in land that would probably either have to be agricultural, but not good agricultural land, but ultimately have the ability to buffer from adjacent properties and ultimately be of an industrial nature. Is that a fair assessment?
Through the chair to Councillor Harris, that sounds right, yes.
Yeah, so that puts us in the box relative to the land availability from that standpoint. And picking up on the earlier question that I asked, about snowmelt, typically would you not also want it close to a natural runoff so that ultimately it goes into just normal drainage that then percolates off to a water course in some manner, as opposed to necessarily ending up in our stormwater management system?
Through the chair to Councillor Harris, it has to be into a designated system. So whether that's our city system or our city system as an extension of a natural water course, something like that, yes.
Yeah, so if we had a piece of available land that was in the industrial area, for example, that had access to a natural drain course, we restrain the water on site in a pond. Ultimately, it's released. It's almost like a wastewater treatment facility. You release twice annually or whatever the case may be. And then that goes out. If not, like in the city of Edmonton, they have one north of the White Mud. That obviously is coursed to a drain, beside a drain course. That obviously drains into there, I would presume. If not, it has to go into an engineered system, our stormwater system. Is that kind of what you're telling us?
Through the chair to Councillor Harris, yeah, it would need to go into an engineered system or a designated system, not just direct into a natural water course, is my understanding of the different regulations that it would fall under.
Yeah, okay, so the regulations are what they are, and ultimately the design will be predicated on those regulations.
Yeah.
But does your cost anticipate going into just a natural drain course after it's been retained on site for a period of time to meet the regulations, or does it then have to be serviced with piped system in some manner?
Through the chair to Councillor Harris, that would again, the costs are to develop the land itself. The servicing off-site is not included in these costs. It would depend on the parcel of land and what's adjacent to it as to what those final would be.
So that's a clarification from one of your earlier comments in terms of site servicing. Okay, thanks. Yeah, I think that's going to be an important bit of information that we're going to have to look at because it should be kept in the background relative to the overall financial impact on it because that could be very significant depending on where it is. It's almost like having adjacent or having leapfrog development and having to do something in between the existing infrastructure and where this thing is out a ways from development. So anyways, I think it needs to be acknowledged in that context. So thanks.
Thank you. That looks like all the questions. Next steps, I guess we will see you again during budget time.
Through the 10-year plan, yes.
Yes. Next is councillor inquiries. Anybody? Mayor Ketcher?
So mine's not an inquiry, but it's a point of interest. And Councillor Harris may want to jump in because it was really his yesterday. So I don't know if you want to talk about the announcement that happened yesterday. It was very exciting and great to have so many people come out for the wastewater treatment plant.
Well, points of interest is not on here, but I'll allow it, Mayor Ketcher. There you go, Councillor Harris.
Well, picking up on the mayor's comment, we had occasion to attend an event at the site. Now, I did follow that up with a very short video to show council kind of a panoramic view of the Train 4 project. It's extremely huge. It's bigger than I anticipated, standing on the existing third train of the treatment facility and then looking out over this construction site. They expect to have 1,100 folks out there in the not too distant future. So the project is well underway. And so in recognition of the provincial government funding this project to the tune of $50 million, we had 2 ministers and 7 mayors on site yesterday to acknowledge the project and to acknowledge the provincial government's decision to support the Train 4 project because of the significant benefits it brings to the region, to the 13 municipalities of the Arrow Utilities, formerly the Capital Region Wastewater Treatment Facility, and I guess ultimately to help to deal and help the province address its environmental strategies in relation to the creation of hydrogen and as a cleaner fuel, if you will. So we had good input from Minister Dreesen and Minister Neudorf from Southern Alberta, who came out to talk about the project. So very, very, very positive comments from the ministers and from the provincial government. So that was a good news story. So thanks for bringing that up, Mayor Ketcher.
Thank you. And I'm not seeing anything else on there. We do have items to discuss in closed sessions, so I'll take a motion to move in camera. Mayor Ketcher?
I'll make a motion to move into confidential closed session to discuss matters that fall within the exceptions of the Disclosure of Division 2, Part 1 of the Freedom of Information and Protection and Privacy Act.
Thank you. Please cast your vote. Thank you. And we will move into closed session.